Hey everyone, and welcome back. I hope things are going well. We're going to be starting up our next day of review here, which you can see is solving by factoring. So this was a lesson that we had. I believe it was actually our last lesson that we had prior to spring break. So if you are struggling, even after watching this video lesson, trying to make sense of stuff, please remember you can always go back to the review folder. I'm sorry, not the review folder, the daily folder we had for Friday right before break and watch that video lesson. It'll be more thorough and more detailed, and that may be a little bit more beneficial for you. Otherwise, we're going to get started here. We want to be solving by using that factoring. Now, we factored a couple days ago in our video lesson, and that was, again, review. So factoring is when we take this type of setup, x squared minus 11x plus 24, and we turn it into that structure that looks like this, right? That's factoring, where this is x, and this is x, and this is a number, and this is another number. So we're going to turn it into something like that, and then take one more step beyond that. And when we're solving, we're essentially wanting to know, what does x equal? Okay, so you can see we've got two sets of problems. First one is 1 through 8. In all of these, there is no number in front of the x squared. So you can see in all of these examples, 1 through 8, there is no number in front of the x squared. And then the last 4 questions, all 4 of those do have a number in front of the x squared. So in this top section, I'm going to do questions 1 and 2. Talk through those. Hopefully that is a good refresher for you. And then you'll be responsible for doing questions 3 through 8 on your own and trying those out. And then down in the bottom portion, I'll do question 9 with you guys, and then you'll do 10, 11, and 12 on your own. Okay, so without further ado, we'll get started here. We want to solve x squared minus 11x plus 24 equals 0. In other words, what x values, what could I plug in for x to make the left side of that equation equal 0? So what we're going to do is we are going to factor that left side. So that's where we look for, again, two numbers that are going to multiply to equal 24 and are going to add to equal negative 11. So first thing we'll do is we'll think about our factors of 24. 1 and 24 add to 25, so that's not the case. 2 and 12 add to 14, so that's not good. 3 and 8 is 11, and we're very close. We wanted negative 11 right here. So that just means we want to use negative 3 and negative 8, because negative 3 times negative 8 is still positive 24, but when we add those together, that equals negative 11. So these are the factors right here, negative 3 and negative 8. So what that means is inside my parentheses, I'm going to have x minus 3 and x minus 8, and include this last part of equaling 0. Now, on Friday before break, we talked about something called the zero product property, which meant that if we have two things that are multiplied together to equal 0, that means one of the two of them has to equal 0. So either x minus 3 has to equal 0, or x minus 8 has to equal 0. So what we do is we just solve each of those two equations, and whatever x is, those are our answers. So in this case, x minus 3 equals 0. Well, I would just add 3 to both sides. 0 plus 3 is 3. So one of my solutions is x is equal to 3. In the other case, I would just add the 8 to both sides. And 0 plus 8 is obviously 8. So my two solutions are 3 and 8. When we plug 3 into this equation, it would end up equaling 0. And if we plug 8 into that equation, it would also end up equaling 0. So that is how we solve by factoring. Okay, we are going to write out the factors of that c value. We're going to find the two factors that work. We're going to write the factored form, and then set each piece equal to 0 and solve. Okay, so we'll take a look at a second example here. Now you'll notice in question number 2, we don't have it equal to 0. That is an important thing that we need to have. And you'll see in some of these other problems, like in question 6, it doesn't equal 0. In question 8, it doesn't equal 0. And down at the bottom in question 12, it doesn't equal 0. So what do? We just move that number back to the other side of the equal sign so that it does equal 0. So I would subtract the 5 over to the other side. X squared comes down, plus 7x. 15 minus 5 is 10, equals 5 minus 5 is 0. Now we're ready to go. Okay, so just keep that idea in mind. Like for question 6, move the 15 over. Question 8, move the 6 over. Question 12, move the 12 over. Okay, so now when we have this x squared plus bx plus c, we are ready to factor. So factors of 10. 1 and 10 equal 11. No good. 2 and 5 equals 7. Perfect. That's what we wanted because our b value was 7. So I write out my factors are 2 and 5. So it's going to be x plus 2, x plus 5 equals 0. From there, that last step, set each of these two pieces. X plus 2 either equals 0 or x plus 5 equals 0. In this case, we want to subtract the 2 from both sides to get x by itself. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Subtract the 5. 0 minus 5 is negative 5. Okay. So those are our final answers. X equals negative 2 and x equals negative 5. Okay. So for questions 3 through 8, again, you're just going to factor those problems and then set each individual factor, each set of parentheses equal to 0 and solve. Okay. Now, down here, we'll do question 9 together. Remember that when there is a number in front of the x squared, there's a different factoring method we have to do. We take that number in front, and we ideally want to get rid of it. It's easier to factor when we don't have it. So what we do is we take that number and we multiply it to the back number. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. What this allows us to do is it allows us to rewrite this original quadratic without the 3 in front. So now it's just going to be an x squared minus 2x, but I can't call it minus 5 anymore. I have to use this negative 15 that I had before when multiplying. Okay. Now, I want to take that number, and I'll still put the 0 there. I'm not going to use it. But now what I want to do is I want to factor this, just like we did above. Okay, so factors of negative 15. Remember, we've talked about this several times. If that's a negative in front of the 15, that means one of my factors is positive, one of my factors is negative. Because a positive times a positive is positive, a negative times a negative is positive. The only way to multiply two things together to get a negative, one is positive, one is negative. So let's try negative 1, positive 15. When we add those together, that's 14. And we talked about before, if I flipped it, if I had made it positive 1 and negative 15, that would just be negative 14. So either way, we're going to get a 14 with those numbers. So we move forward. 2 is not a factor of 15, so we go to 3. Let's try negative 3 and 5. Negative 3 plus 5 is positive 2. And we're close. We want negative 2. So that means we're just going to flip where the minus is. 3 and negative 5. 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Those are the two factors. Now, remember, at this point, we do not do this. We don't do x plus 3, x minus 5. Okay, we do not do that because our original problem actually did have a number in front. So what we did was we rewrote this original problem, 3x squared, but we took this minus 2x and we replaced it with these two terms. We split it up. So now instead of writing minus 2x, it's going to be plus 3x minus 5x, because these two together actually does become minus 2x, which is what we had in the original. We're just rewriting it this way so that we can end up factoring by GCF in a little bit. Okay, so the 3x stays like it normally does. The minus 2x splits, and then this minus 5 comes back over here. Okay, it's now at this point that we group. We put the first two terms together, and we put the second two terms together. And from each group, we take out the GCF. What can we take out of both? So when I look at this first pairing, I can see that I could take a 3 out of each. And this has an x squared. This has 1x, so I could take a single x out of both. When we do that, 3 divided by 3 is 1. X squared divided by x is x. And then for the second term, positive 3 divided by 3 is positive 1. X divided by x is 1. I don't need to rewrite the 1 again because 1 times 1 is 1. Okay. So after I factor out the first part, I get 3x on the outside, and I get x. Essentially, I can get rid of that 1. X plus 1 on the inside. Okay. Now with the second term, I don't want to have this negative here, so I have to factor that out. And then I have a 5 that I could take out of each. This has an x, but the back one does not, so I can't take an x out. So the best I can take out is a negative 5. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 is positive 1. X divided by, well, there's nothing on the outside, so that x just stays. And then we see, again, I don't need that 1. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 is positive 1. Okay. Now, we talked about our way of checking our answer. If what's inside the parentheses is the same, we know we did this correct. So, x plus 1, is it my first? Oh, sorry about that. X plus 1 is my first. My second factor is whatever's on the outside. 3x minus 5. Now remember, this all equals 0. Don't want to forget about that. This all ends up equaling 0. And now we finish this problem just like we did before. I'm going to set this first term equal to 0. X plus 1 equals 0. I'm going to set the second term equal to 0. 3x minus 5. For the first one, subtract 1 from both sides. X equals negative 1. Done. Add the 5 to both sides. 3x equals 5. Divide by 3. That's going to end up being a fraction, so you can just leave it as 5/3. Or if you wanted to do the division, you could do 5 divided by 3. And you could write 1.6 repeating. Either one is acceptable. Okay, but those are our final answers. Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, I want to be as honest as I possibly can. These are hard problems to do. Okay, they are. They're hard to learn while you're in an actual classroom with a teacher there to help you. So I can only imagine it makes it that much harder to do at home watching a video on your own. So please do not beat yourself up or feel bad if you're really having a hard time with this and struggling. I completely understand where you're at. And I will do my best to try to further help you in any way that I can. Please feel free to email me or send me a message through Schoology or something like that. But please do not worry if you're still confused by this and not understanding it completely. It is a very, very difficult math concept for Algebra 1. So with all that being said, what I would ask is that you just try. Do your best. And if you don't get it, that's okay. Right now, I'm really just looking for that effort and that you're putting forth your best as we go. Okay, so again, you've got a couple problems up above, 3 through 8 for practice, and then a couple more down below, 10 through 12. And you can always look through the examples that were already done, go back and watch other videos, stuff like that. Remember, again, just for 12, you want to make sure you move that 12 back over to the other side so that it ends up equaling 0. But that'll be it. So thank you guys for watching. I hope all is well with you and with your family. Take care. And we'll